with her connections to the city they had just left, and Leith's Eastern Russ origins. Yet even they had made no complaint. In truth, there had been no complaint from Ketil, though Halfdan could sense the growing distance between them regardless. He clenched his teeth. They were rich, no matter the conditions, and he would reclaim what was theirs. They had tales to tell in the mead halls of the north, and they would have many more yet. Here in this crucible of war they called Apulia, he would make a new name for them, and Ketil would cleave to him once more. For all the trouble he could be, after all they had been through together, Halfdan could not imagine a world without his friend. His eyes drifted back to the land before them. Dry, hot, and mostly brown, the countryside lay spread in an arc before the landing fleet. It was almost uniformly occupied, the Byzantine army of Apulia waiting in blocks and columns for the fresh manpower arriving from the east. Halfdan had learned a little of the situation in the region during their journey from men who had already fought out here. Once, long ago, the Byzantine Empire had owned these lands, and now they fought to reclaim them from the Northmen, Normans as they were known here, and other local warlords. Every small state seemed to have its own lord and government, and so the war was a complex beast with many faces, each of them bearing sharp teeth. The Byzantines had been faring well until the changes of emperor back in the capital, which had led to failures of command and logistics, leaving the army hesitant, uncertain, and poorly supplied. They had all but lost control of a huge island called Sicily to the south these past few years, and their control on the mainland had now devolved to strips of coastline on the south and east of the peninsula. The west was held by Italian nobles, with the hilly inland under Norman control. It was a mess. But when it came to war, a mess was a useful thing for a mercenary. It meant there was money to be made and, for those with no national loyalty, changing sides when it was most profitable was always an attractive proposition. Yes, Halfdan could lead his friends to success here. The first ship to beach had been the flagship, commanded by the officer who had led this relief force from Miklagartha, a smarmy and unpleasant man by the name of Pardos. Unlike a northern army, which would beach as fast as possible and move on, everything Byzantine was slow and regimented. The troops began to assemble at the prows of the ships, ready to disembark on the work of Pardos, who even now was striding down the ramp, followed by bannermen and musicians and colourful courtiers, making his way to meet the great figure awaiting him on the beach. Halfdan remembered Georgios Maniakes from that dreadful day of the revolution in Miklagartha, and the sight of the giant brought back hair-raising memories. But Maniakes was a warrior born and bred as much as any Northman, and if there was one person who could perhaps lead an army to recover the Empire's lost lands here, it was him. It came as something of a surprise when Pardos's hand went up, signalling the disembarkation of the relief force before he had even reached the enormous catapan on the beach. Halfdan had been warned by one of the officers that they would be unlikely to set foot on land for at least an hour. The commander would have to report to Maniakes and await the catapan's instructions for the distribution and settling of forces. Halfdan turned, brow raised in question, to Gunnhild. She had an uncertain look in her eyes, increasingly common these days, and something that Halfdan had never expected to see. Still, she shook her head. Something is wrong. The goddess whispers to you again. She clenched her hands on the rail, her fingers busily finding a substitute for the stout ash of her staff, lost in the east. No, but I have eyes and ears. This is not how this is supposed to go. Hardly a surprise with Halfdan Loki cursed steering our ship, grumbled Ketil behind them, earning a glare from both Halfdan and Gunnhild. Watch the two leaders, she advised, as the officers on the ship began...